Welcome to Democracy in the News, which I think is going to be the new name for my weekly news stream. This week, we've got a channel update, as always. I'm going to talk to you about that DSA meeting I went to last week, or virtually, of course. We've got the George Floyd and the Derek Chauvin trial verdict to discuss. Defund the police. I have an interesting image I thought was a good symbol or representation of what the idea of defund the police is. And I have a short article, or not article, but piece or segment I want to do on Biden's new proposed military budget. And then there was also been getting some emails from a PAC called PAC to the Future that I wanted to talk to you a little bit about and some of the themes surrounding political action committees. With that said, let's get started. So the first thing I always like to say is I like to do my rewatch disclaimer. So if you're watching this on rerun, which is most likely how you're going to see it, usually about at least half the viewers that eventually see the stream watch it after the fact. So if you're watching on Facebook, sorry, but there are no chapters. If you're on YouTube, you'll see chapters at the bottom. So you can jump to whatever story or article might interest you the most rather than watching through all of it if you don't want to. I mean, watch as much of it as you want to, but just giving you that option. And if you're on YouTube and you're not subscribed, consider subscribing and liking the video and hitting the notification bell and all that good stuff. All right. Let me see. Boom. Okay, so the channel update is pretty brief. I'm working on the white supremacy short that I want to do that's less than a minute long and kind of goes basically over the concept of white supremacy and as it relates to systemic racism as I see it. And then I have two pieces of legislation. I want to do what I think I'm going to call a legislative stream. So I get the information together, kind of have it ready, and then kind of go on stream and talk about the legislation and all the details about it. And so I kind of call those my legislation streams. And I think the first one I'm going to do is going to be on HR 1. And then the second one is probably going to be on the PROAct, which is the legislation that I was in that DSA meeting about. So as you can see today, I have my suit and my shirt and my suit on. This is going to be a shorter stream than usual. I'm thinking only about 40 minutes. So I thought I'd go ahead and wear the suit. I don't always wear it because it's kind of warm and I want to be comfortable. And so in this case, it's going to be shorter, and I may clip some of these pieces and make them separate videos. Speaking of which, I didn't hit the record on my camera. So I'm going to step off stream for a moment and hit the record on my camera so I can get the highest quality video for the stream. So I see somebody just hopped in. Please bear with me for 1 second. I'm about to go into the DSA meeting story. I'm just going to hit record on my camera. 1 second. All right, there we go. Oh, and I moved my camera. Oh, no. There we go. I was outside of my green screen over there. My green screen got out of frame, so it messed me up a little bit. All right. So here we go. So as I said, last week I did my stream a little bit earlier than usual. The reason being because I wanted to attend a meeting of the Democratic Socialists of America. Oh, that's the screen moving behind me. I heard a noise. Anyway, meeting of the DSA, which is the Democratic Socialists of America. They're probably, as any kind of major political organization, probably the closest in terms to where I position myself in terms of my positions. They're in favor of Green New Deal, Medicare for all, and a lot of the types of legislation that I want to see to improve American society. And so I'm very interested in what they're doing in terms of trying to move those, we'll fight for 15 as well, moving those causes forward. And so I wanted to, so in this case, they are having a meeting talking about the PROAct, which is legislation to try to improve the ability of unions to form and be successful and be effective in modern society. Because right now, legislatively speaking, it's a pretty hostile environment in America for unions. It's hard for them to form. There's a lot of laws, excuse me, in various states that make joining unions more difficult and makes it difficult for unions to raise enough money to function and maintain themselves. And I can go in more into that, if people kind of ask me, what do you mean by that? And you can put something in the comments, ask me questions. I'll make videos and certainly explain why I'm saying this. But the point is, it's hard for, and also when I go into the PROAct in detail in that legislative stream, I'll talk about the reasons why it's necessary. And so I went to this meeting, and I was a little disappointed because they didn't actually go that much in depth into talking about the PROAct itself. They started off with like the whole group, everybody who was in like the Zoom meeting, talking about the different components of the act in terms of why they think it was important. So they weren't really going into the details of it so much as saying, this is the difficulties that unions are having, and this is what I've experienced, what I've seen. And so they started that way. Then they broke out into groups based on your type of work you were in. And so we broke into these different groups. I went into like the nonprofit group. And going into that, I found that, they were talking primarily about what are your experiences in the workplace. It's almost like they were trying to kind of engender people, hey, share your stories and get you comfortable talking about your experiences in order to support the idea of building, worker power through unions. And so I did enjoy experiences. I didn't really participate much in terms of speaking. But I did listen to what people had to say about working in nonprofits and working generally without union representation and the challenges that can bring and some of the bad experiences that people had. And so I did appreciate that. I thought I was glad I went to it. But I'm going to have to do some additional research, I think, on the PROAct itself to better understand it, because it was much more about people sharing their narratives and what they experienced, more so than talking more about legislative minutia, which is understandable. I think it was more about building, more about trying to build support. And oftentimes the way to do that, the best way to do that actually is through talking narratives and talking about what people experience and difficulties and problems we have versus, say, going into the ins and outs of legislation or talking about statistics. Those just aren't particularly convincing in terms of trying to convince people to be in favor of the whatever issue that you have. So that's that. I see that's that a lot in these streams. I need to try to find something else. Anyway, so the big story for this week was, of course, the announcement by the jury or by the court of the jury's decision to convict former officer Derek Chauvin of the murder of George Floyd. And the jury came back in only 11 hours of deliberation and delivered guilty verdicts on second-degree murder, third-degree murder, and manslaughter. And those charges were kind of essentially different degrees of guilt. So, obviously, if they find him guilty on second degree, they probably were going to find him guilty on third and on the manslaughter charge. But, when I heard that they come back from a verdict in only 11 hours, I was about 99% sure that they weren't coming back with not guilty, because considering the evidence in this case, the video recording, all the testimony from his superiors and fellow officers expressing concern about and derision towards his treatment of George Floyd, that a jury in essentially one day would be able to come back with a guilty verdict. And hung jury, again, too soon. If you're going to say your jury's hung, you got to give it more time than a day to figure it out. The only question at that point was, what did they convict him of? So honestly, my guess was third degree. I thought maybe that would be kind of, splitting the difference to get a quick decision. But that jury was actually pretty well convinced of his guilt on second degree as well as third degree and manslaughter. Now, the picture I used for the cover of this video was a picture of Derek Chauvin when the decision was being announced. And it was very weird because he was kind of darting his eyes back and forth. I think he was pretty nervous. And I think he had kind of done the same calculus that I'm doing right now, thinking if they're coming back in a decision in one day, my odds aren't very good. In fact, he didn't seem surprised at all when it was finally announced the decisions. And I think that was because, you come back to a decision in a day, it's probably guilty. Now, one thing that people may not know is that when this first happened, before all the press and all the attention, the Minnesota Attorney General's office, or the prosecutors, however you want to call it, offered him third degree plea deal, and he didn't accept it. He decided instead to go to court. And I think it may have had something to do with the fact that more attention was being brought to it. Maybe he wanted the attention, he wanted the trial. I can't speak to his mind state, but considering the evidence, a rational person would have probably taken the third-degree deal. He didn't, in the hopes of getting found not guilty or getting a hung jury, which with a case this big, you can probably have to try at least twice, but you get 2 hung juries, maybe they just stop trying to convict you. But seems pretty likely that he thought that he'd have a chance of actually getting off and being able to get away kind of scot-free. And it's a testament to the mind state of some policemen that one that did this would think that he might be able to actually get away with it despite the video evidence of the case. But it's very interesting to me that this went the way it went, and I expected it to take longer, deliberation to be longer. Now, one thing that I found a tweet from Representative Cori Bush of Missouri that I thought was indicative for me how I kind of felt about this trial, watching go on and then waiting for the decision like everybody else in the world. She said, her tweet went, thinking about the fact that we all watched George Floyd get murdered, but as we watch this trial, we all have this gut-wrenching fear that Derek Chauvin won't get convicted. That shows you just how unjust the system truly is. And I would add to that, with me, I'm never sure that things can't get worse. People compared this in the past to the Rodney King verdict back in the early 90s and how that showed us that justice wasn't necessarily something that was easy to get, being a victim of violence by the police. And you could even look at it as the beginning of an era of seeing public police overreach documented, and the police to some extent being able to get away with it. And all we can hope is that with this verdict, perhaps though it'll indicate or be the beginning of a different era, one in which police are held more accountable for violence conflicted upon the people they're supposed to be protecting, and that juries will see this and see the reaction to it and recognize that the police are not above the law and that we have to be willing to hold them accountable. We give them a great trust when we put a gun on their arm and tell them to serve and protect. And if they violate that trust, that we're going to hold them accountable for it. I think I have people in my family who have served in served in policing have served in policing, and it's a job that's I'm very proud of them for doing that. I think it's a public service, but it's a unique form of public service in which, unfortunately, sometimes things can go very badly. And a great deal of trust is placed in the individuals that that choose that career, and that while we have to appreciate them, we also need to hold them accountable in order to protect the public good. And in this case, I was very worried that this might have gone the wrong direction, that we might have seen an acquittal. I was worried about the potential riots, the potential outcry. I was worried about that. But I was also worried because right now, when it comes to what's going on in the world today, I don't have a lot of faith that things are just going to turn out okay. I feel like with a lot of things, it can go either way. And which way it goes affects a lot of people, not just in this case, Derek Chauvin, or even just the people of Minneapolis or Minnesota. So I hope unfortunately, just since this verdict was announced, there have been several other cases of potential malfeasance on the part of police. A girl that had a knife and called the police, but she was trying to protect herself from some people and got shot by the police that she called. That case is not as clear cut. There's video. Apparently she was somewhat, agitated. So there are people on both sides of that one. It's not going to be as clear cut as this case. There's another case with, I think, another like a 15-year-old that got shot by a policeman. So fortunately, this doesn't stop, and police violence is very common, be it justified or not, but we have to have better systems in place to deal with them so that we can recognize which ones are following the way the police are trained and supposed to behave and which ones don't, and hold them accountable for those that don't do it, that don't follow the process correctly. All right. So my next video here is, I'm going to share my screen. It was a cartoon that I thought was I did a video in the past, and I'll post the one on after I finish recording and I do the processing and make this into a standard YouTube video, I'll put the card up there. But I did a video about defund the police. And so I saw a cartoon here on Instagram that I thought was a good representation of defund the police. And it's kind of small on your screen, but it's a picture of a piggy bank with police written on it, cracked open, and then all the little pieces of money falling down into these hands. And the hands had things like jobs, housing, food, education, and healthcare. And it's a good representation because people talk about defund the police, or even some people say abolish the police. So most people say defund because the concept of policing is important if you have laws. But I put both here just to be fair. Some people call it defund, like myself. Other people I've heard say abolish. It's not our place, I think, to worry about pointing fingers about names. It's more important to talk about what they mean. And so, the idea, and I'm going to take this off now. Hold on, because I need to be able to see my talking points here. Hold on, that I wrote up earlier. There we go. The idea of defund the police is to break open those police budgets that have only gotten bigger and bigger over the past several decades. I mean, a lot of it had to do with things like the drug war and the crack epidemic, and some things that were valid reasons and some things that weren't. But the idea is to break open that bank and fully reconsider how that budget is used. Don't kind of keep it and then do other stuff, but actually go into that money and saying, as far as dealing with crime and dealing with disorder in our communities, is simply funding the police the best way to do that, or are there other methodologies? When it comes to something like the drug war, the crack epidemic's over. When it comes to the drug war in general, I think in most part, people tend to believe that drugs won, and that the way to fight drugs is not with guns and with violence, but with education and with understanding and compassion for those that do fall under the sway of drug addiction. And to that end, something like defund the police wants to crack open that piggy bank and spend some of those police funds on other things like healthcare, which I mentioned in the picture, to actually help people who have drug addictions and help people deal with those things. Also, I wish one of those arms had said alternative policing in it instead of one of the other ones. I mean, jobs is cool, but jobs is very generic. Maybe replace that with alternate policing. That way you can do something where you're because that's part of it is other ways of policing. So policing doesn't have to be someone armed to the teeth going to deal with someone with a mental health emergency, for example. It might be somebody. I talked about a situation where pulling over cars, and what if the people that dealt with giving speeding tickets weren't armed, weren't checking for warrants, weren't turning every car stop into a potential shootout, but instead purely existed to deal with handing out police summons or tickets that you go to court and deal with, rather than them having anything to do with trying to find more serious crimes or be a way of catching more serious criminals, because that essentially turns every one of us who might be pulled over for having a broken taillight into a potential hardened convict from the eyes of the police officer. So these are the ideas. It's really about reimagining policing and reconsidering these things. Now, someone like former President Barack Obama talked about, well, why not name it that? Why not call it reimagining the police or police reform or something like that? And the reason is because it has to be clear that what we're talking about here is really pulling money out of police budgets. That one of the core tenets of defund the police or abolish the police is the budgets are too big. We're giving them too much money. And so these ideas of reimagining or reform are purely a way potentially of either keeping the budgets the same or actually adding more money into them. And I think most communities that take up these names are doing so specifically to have that fight over those funds, because that indicates as a society where your priorities are. If your priorities are with the armed control of our communities, then the money goes to the police as they stand now. But if you're trying to deal with other aspects or other priorities, well, your money has to be redistributed to reflect that. And that's what defunding the police is about. It's about the reality of how much money the police have in their budgets, which people don't know. I mean, there's some communities where over half of the money the community brings in goes right to the police. That's part of understanding this issue, is understanding the way things are now. And that the police don't get like 5 cents out of every dollar taxed or something like that. It's much larger than that for most like general communities. And so defund the police is about recognizing that issue and the nature of it and facing it head on. Just to pop back to that cartoon one more time so you can see it again. Whoop, there it is. Crack the police, piggy bank open. You got jobs, housing, food, education, and healthcare. We still need policing. As long as we have laws, we need policing, but we can consider other ways of policing and perhaps being able to redistribute that funds to more effectively improve our communities. Hence the image. All right. Okay, next story. So a few weeks ago, I came upon this, that President Biden had proposed a new Pentagon budget of $753 billion, I said million here, $1 billion, an increase from last year's under President Trump. Now, the fiscal year, I couldn't find fiscal 2020, but fiscal 2019, which was, I think, Trump's, I guess, third year of his budget, the budget was $686 billion. So since then, in 2 years, it's gone up 10%. Now that's well greater than what you might be able to account for with inflation. And so the question is, what are we spending that or what would we be spending that $750 billion on? Now, just so you know, generally speaking, it's not on the nuclear weapons that actually protect us from anybody invading us. Those are mostly maintained by the Department of Energy and will be reflected in that budget. Now, there are exceptions, though. Of course, we have nuclear-powered submarines, although I don't know how many are still in service, as well as I think maybe even some ships on water might carry nuclear weapons. So I'm not saying the military doesn't handle any nuclear weapons, but primarily all our land-based, our primary arsenal of nuclear weapons is maintained with monies from the Department of Energy. Now, so just a cost breakdown, the way that money actually is spent is primarily on maintaining the hundreds of military bases around the world, maintaining I think it's hundreds of thousands, it may even be millions, but at least hundreds of thousands of at-ready soldiers that we maintain through housing and healthcare and all those different things that humans need to survive, maintaining the land and air equipment like tanks, airplanes, buying new ones, and even now we mostly don't even use that stuff, but there's also the stuff we actually do use, like drones and missiles and bombs. So that's what that money is going to. And it's also going to, I think some veteran stuff is in there. I'm not sure if all of it is, but some veteran stuff is in there too, according to what I read. So that's where that money is going. It's going to the maintenance of our empire that we, United States, have built and spread around the world. We have, military bases in over, I believe, like over 90 countries. We maintain a political presence and act as, in a sense, the policeman of the world. And that's our choice. And you could say we need to do that. But the question is, do we really need to spend $753 billion to do it? Do we need to spend more than we spent last year? Because, China, for example, is another country, probably our chief rival in terms of power, spends about $250 billion to maintain their military and their presence around the world. Now, they don't have an empire as big as ours, but just to comparison's sake, that's kind of how you can look at this. Like, do we need to be spending almost 3 times as much as they do? Now, that 250 billion was 2019, and maybe 270 now in American dollars. But the point is, they spend a whole lot of money, less than us. And what are we getting for that? Are we getting a good value, or is the military industrial complex taking us for a ride? My feeling is that this is to some extent political cowardice on the part of President Biden. And cowardice is kind of a harsh word, but what else can you say when essentially he's so afraid of being looked at as weak, he wants to increase the budget of something that we're already probably spending too much money on? I mean, we're talking about pulling out of Afghanistan. Why are we raising our military budget? Where is that money needed to go to? What needs to be made bigger, be more expensive than what it is now? A few years ago, Bernie Sanders, along with the Republican, I think it was, not Ron Paul's son, Rand Paul. I think those two, they tried to do an audit. That was an audit of the Fed, but Bernie and somebody tried to do an audit of the military, and they couldn't do it because the money goes into this black hole, and we don't know where it goes. There's a huge problem. I mean, the military, we're afraid. Military is perfectly willing to send information into the press, and you see what happened with Biden into Afghanistan. Now you've got these leaks to the press about, maybe it's going to endanger women in Afghanistan, or there may be another 9/11 if we pull out of Afghanistan, even though the the people were from Saudi Arabia, 16 or 17 of them. But there's all kinds of fear mongering. The military knows how to play the media. And I think Biden doesn't want any of that smoke. I think he's taking so much heat for Afghanistan. On the military, I think he wants to just go ahead and keep the generals, keep the people happy that he's dealing with. And indeed, the person that is his, what's that person called? The person that's in charge of the military, essentially, the black dude that he appointed, that was a general. That guy was on the board of Raytheon and other military contractors. That guy is enmeshed in the military industrial complex. National Security Advisor, I think that might have been it. But the point is, we're spending a whole bunch of money, and it's not clear why, or indeed exactly what we're spending it on. They have the basic numbers. You can go to Wikipedia or other places and you see 150 billion for this, 300 for this, but it's not really clear what the value is, what the purpose of it is. And I think that's something we need to consider and think about. And in my opinion, with the federal government, every taxpayer should have a pretty good idea of what the money is being spent on. And I don't think there's nearly enough transparency in the federal government in general, and especially with things like the Fed and the military, to know what our money is being used on and how. So that's something that I think we should be thinking about. Now, here's another thing. I think that in terms of that money, the battle, the war that's going on right now, the real struggle really is between the United States and China, but it's more of an economic struggle as far as economic dominance. I mean, our money, the American dollar, is one of the international currencies of the world. And China is another one. And the euro is a challenge to that. And China's currency, to some extent, is a challenge to that. But although China's more so because we depend on them so much, they kind of win the import-export battle with us. We give them more wealth than they give us in terms of the import-export. Now, we could spend more money to strengthen our economy, to make our businesses better and more independent from China in order to improve that import-export relationship and that economic give and take with China. That's a choice we could do too. And I think that, even though I don't know how important the win or quote unquote win that battle with China is, but I think that would probably be a better use of our money than some of the money we're spending on our military on dropping bombs in countries we're not at war with. So that's something to consider too, is that even if you don't spend it on that and want to spend it on something in terms of maintaining dominance as an empire, if that's what you want to do, there are other ways that might be better ways of spending it rather than the military. But again, because of the military industrial complex, there's a circular momentum of we pay into these military, these contractors like Raytheon, like Boeing. They then lobby Congress and lobby the president and lobby them in order to keep that money flowing. And so it's hard to break loose of that loop, that kind of, spending and then lobbying loop that churns in Washington, that keeps that money flowing and keeps those budgets going up every year. So that's something to keep in mind. Yeah. Oh, that's actually the only slide. I thought I had another slide on that, but that's actually the only slide on it. All right. And so the last thing I wanted to talk to you about today is there's a PAC that came on my radar called PAC to the Future. Kind of a play on Back to the Future, I suppose. That's kind of cute. So I've gotten on a bunch of mailing lists after the 2020 election. I think I was signed up to Bernie's and a couple senators, a couple Congress members. And what happens with these email lists is once you get on one or two of them, sometimes they give or share or sell their lists to other people. And so somehow I ended up on this PAC to the Future mailing list. And I started getting mailers that seemed to be from Nancy Pelosi. Now, you're probably getting at least one of these emails where they're from the politician whose campaign they're theoretically from. So, I've gotten them from like the Cory Booker or Jamie Harris. I'll say from Cory Booker, from Jerry Harris. These are obviously not personal emails. These are fundraising blasts that are being sent out. It's just kind of cute to me that they're supposedly from the individual. Like I got countless ones from Barack Obama and his wife, for example. So the moment I saw Nancy Pelosi's name, I got suspicious because I know I did not sign up for a mailing list for Nancy Pelosi. Okay. So why is the single Democrat in the House that already raises the most money asking me for even more money? So it turns out, as I discovered, that this is a political action committee. Oh, well, I probably should have turned my phone sound off. Hold on a sec. Sheesh. So it turns out that I gotten on the mailing list for this, what they call a leadership PAC that's run through Nancy Pelosi's congressional office. The email is actually info@packtothefuture.org. Now, if you try to go to packtothefuture.org, like just as a website, it directs you straight to a donation site. So it doesn't even really have a website with any policy or any kind of things on it to let you know, hey, we're for healthcare access or any kind of even milquetoast, centrist Democrat stuff. It doesn't say anything. It just says, give me money, elect Democrats. Okay, that's all this is about. And as I said, most of the time it's from Nancy Pelosi. Every once in a while it says Stacey Abrams or somebody else. So here's what I did. I went to a website called opensecrets.org. They track a lot of campaign finance stuff, and I looked it up. First thing I saw, the treasurer's name is Paul F. Pelosi, probably her brother, maybe a nephew, a cousin, I don't know, family member. As I said, I found out the type of PAC it is a leadership PAC. And I'm going to give you the definition from Open Secrets in a second, because there's different types of PACs based on different sections of campaign finance law. And then it is affiliated with Nancy Pelosi's office, and they raised $10 million in the 2020 cycle, which was 4 times any previous cycle. So PAC to the Future has been around for over a decade. In fact, I found a filing from the FEC about it in like 2002. It may have been its founding document. I'm not sure. It wasn't relevant to my investigation, so I kind of put it aside. But it's been around for these 10 years, but it's generally been $1-2 million bucks, not a whole lot of money. It jumped to 10 million. It's probably because they started using these emails to actually start making getting more small donations. So let me tell you what a leadership PAC is. A leadership PAC, according to Open Secrets, politicians collect money for their own campaigns. We all know that, but many of them also raise a separate pot of money, commonly called a leadership political action committee, to help other politicians. By making donations to members of their party, ambitious lawmakers can use their leadership PACs to gain clout among their colleagues and then boost their bids for leadership posts or committee chairmanships. Politicians also use leadership PACs to lay the groundwork for their own campaigns for higher office. And some use their PACs to hire additional staff, sometimes even their family members, and to travel around the country or eat in some of Washington's finest restaurants. The limits on how a politician can spend leadership PAC money are not especially strict. So as you can see, they correctly predicted that family members might be used for some of these PACs, and these PAC money may end up getting used not for anybody's campaign, but for a nice steak at a nice restaurant like the Capitol Grill there in Washington. Now, here's a question. Why is Nancy Pelosi, who I know already raises the most money of probably any single, at least House member in Congress? Well, the first answer is there's always more money. You can always try to get more power and maintain your power by continuing to raise money and give to fellow Congress members. I checked on Open Secrets, and she gave to 121 various House and Senate members. Now, I'll point it out too. That email certainly makes it sound like the focus is on the House, but it turns out she spreads the money around to both chambers. And so don't even think that just because it's Nancy Pelosi, she's focusing only on the House. She's spreading that money all the way around, usually 10, 20,000 a pop, something like that. Here's another thing. If she can get successfully in on this small donation game and make a lot of money from that, that's money that don't go to her rivals. People like AOC, who has her own, I believe she has her own leadership PAC. She definitely raises money and spreads it around too to try to build her own power for her agenda. So if you're getting money, if she's coming to someone like me, who's generally more of a progressive, and getting me to give her money, that's less money for me to give to an AOC or directly to a politician that maybe challenges an incumbent that she wants to continue to keep in office. Because that's the thing. That's one thing that leaders like Pelosi like about incumbency, is that they, by giving money to these incumbents, raise the person's investment in them and improve that connection. Once a new person comes in, they're like, well, you haven't given me any money. So they don't owe her any, there's no debt that she has over them. There's no pull that she has. She can start giving them money and start that whole process over again. But she'd much rather keep the same people who she's already given a bunch of money to. Now, another thing I wanted to point out is that small dollar donations are kind of the new technology of this kind of political warfare. Warfare, oftentimes you look into history in general, warfare is much more about the new technology. One side had, bronze weapons, the other side didn't, than it does necessarily the number of people. It also can be tactics. Like I think the North had better tactics than the South in the Civil War. In this case, with political combat, small dollar donations are one of the new weapons. It's a technology that help people like AOC and Cori Bush defeat long-term incumbents. That and a lot of course, grassroots, real activism, and really, a lot of, I can't think of the name of it, but, people like actual blood, sweat, and tears, I should just say. But small dollar donations is one of those new technologies that now even establishment people on both sides, Republicans and Democrats, try to use to raise even more money. They still take the money from the corporate donors and the rich people and still have applied, tip their ear for them. But now they're asking us to. And Pack to the Future is an example of that. Now, before I go, I wanted to go over a couple of the things that her emails were all over the place. They weren't just on some specific topic or subject. She really actually went in, and I say she, but not as really as Nancy Pelosi, but the people sending these emails were pretty much trying whatever they could do, any trick in the book to get money out of my pocket. They, of course, do the matching thing, which is I don't like because it makes you think, oh, I'll give to this because it'll be more money. But the purpose of matching is to, again, keep you giving money to entities that already have a lot of money. So the people that do matches are oftentimes those that have big money donors. They'll say, hey, if you do a match situation, it'll help me to bring in money from small donors. So matching tends to be done by those that really don't need small dollar donations as much. So when I see matching, it actually makes me want to donate less because I'm worried about the individuals that are running for office that don't have a big money donor that's willing to do a matching fund program with them. Because if they do, they're less likely to really need my money, really be dependent on the small dollar donations. Because here's the thing. If you have small dollar donations and you don't need them, you're not going to necessarily listen to the people as much that are giving those donations, especially something like this, which is, again, this is not giving money to Nancy Pelosi herself particularly. This really is about giving money to her to then help her develop better connections and better support for maintaining speakers. So it really should be like the speakership fund. If it was being honest, that's really what it is. It's about how to keep Nancy Pelosi as Speaker of the House, because the money you give here helps her work the House and spread the money around and make yourself more powerful. So when they talk about matching and talk about this fund in general, what you're talking about is one of the most successful members of fundraisers in the House asking for you to help them be even more successful. So if you're someone like me who's looking for kind of keeping fresh blood in the House and challenging incumbents, these type of leadership PACs are the last thing you want to give to, because these are the kind of things that strengthen incumbency. Anyway, there's other stuff. Of course, there's emails about how bad Donald Trump is. Oh, Trump said something terrible. Trump's scheming. Trump and McCarthy are scheming to steal the House from Democrats. There's one about Ted Cruz saying something terrible. There's another one where they say like you need to like re-up your Democratic membership. I don't even know what that is. Like membership in what? It's not clear. It's essentially a scam. There was one for Nancy Pelosi's birthday. Do you want to sign the card? Now you see that all the time in campaigns. I told you, I see Barack Obama's birthday. I think every year he was president. I think Alex Padilla's birthday. I got an email for that not too long ago. So the birthday one is very often. And then the other thing is oftentimes you saw Mitch McConnell as like the villain. Like Mitch McConnell's scheming something. You got to be careful. We got to watch out because Mitch McConnell's planning to do this terrible thing and he's getting together to attack these 5 senators and he's trying to do this. So they've got this whole kind of storyline they're trying to sell you and give money to Nancy Pelosi because of Mitch McConnell. And I think one of them was Washington Post just said the House is a lock to go to Republicans in 2022. Now, I didn't bother to even follow the link, but it's probably just an editorial by somebody, maybe a Republican, kind of trying to speak that into the world. But at that point, when that email went out, it had literally been only 1 month into Biden's presidency. So I think even if the Washington Post somehow was saying that as news or factual guessing or factual prediction, it seems very early to make that kind of assertion when Democrats have like a 10-seat majority and we already saw a pullback, or I think it's 8 seats, but we already seen a pullback of some of those purple seats in California in particular. So, but the point is, end of the day, something like this, there's no agenda attached to it. There's no specifics about what you can expect to result from this. All there is if you're blue gang and you hate red gang, give us money so that blue gang can win. And those are the type of kind of tribal politics that I think they hear on my channel for the people that watch this. I think we want to get away from. We want our parties to represent something. And so if you're a Democrat or if you're a Republican, You want your party to represent a certain approach, not just make you feel good about your side and hate the other side, but you want them to represent solutions to the problems you see in our society. And if they don't represent solutions, if they just represent we're better than them, then they may just be pulling one over on you. And the only thing they really represent is incumbency and power. And it can't just be about power. It has to be about something more than that. And anything that I want to give money to, it has to be about more than just maintaining power or gaining power. Because if that's all it's about, then it's a loss for all of us. Because there are a lot of problems we have. I think everybody can agree, on the right or on the left can agree, our society has problems. And the question is, what are our solutions going to be? Are the solutions going to be to ignore the problems, which unfortunately are a lot of what Republicans do, and why, even though I consider myself nonpartisan because I'm not loyal to Democrats, because they're Democrats, I believe in philosophical positions and I have problems I want to see solved. And right now, the Democrats, generally some Democrats have solutions that I like, but it has to be about the solutions and about what's being done and not just colors, right? And so that's this pack, and a lot of them like it, are just about colors. And, we as a populace and as voters have to try to see past that. And our politicians aren't going to be better unless we're better voters and we elect, and that will lead to, because it has to start with us. The change we want to see in our politicians has to start with us, has to start with what we demand and what we look for and what we're willing to say we need to see to get the money out of our pockets and the votes in the ballot box. All right. Now for next week, I think I want to talk a little bit about Justice Breyer, one of the 3 remaining quote unquote liberal justices on the Supreme Court, and whether or not he should consider resigning before 2022. And then I think there's another PAC I'm going to look at next week called Turnout PAC, which I think alternately is referred to as Progressive Turnout PAC. Just how progressive is it? And who's really in charge of it? Now, I see I have one person still in here. If you want to say hello or ask me any questions, I'm certainly willing to do that. But that's all of the stories that I have for today. I might come with a different background for democracy in the news instead of 10 Minutes for Democracy. I'm not sure. That's still my brand, democracy, 10 Minutes for Democracy. So I may keep that and just change like the name. Maybe I'll put it at the bottom. I'm not sure. Do you have any thoughts on that? I'm not sure. Oh, man. Let's see. I don't see any comments. I want to thank everybody for watching the video today. And next week, I might do another thing I was thinking about doing, which is at the beginning of the video, talking about giving almost little 10-second commercials. Because when I first start the stream, there's nobody on it. And so I'm thinking maybe I should I do my channel update, as brief as that is sometimes. And then I'm thinking maybe I should actually talk about some of my most recent videos because they don't get a lot of views. I get actually less views than my streams do. And then I can talk about them, and then I can put, when I put my chapters in, I can also put cards in and link to them. So people can say, oh, I didn't know about that video, and they can click on them. So I may do that. In fact, I'm still here right now. It's the end of the video, but I may try to go ahead and do that. Now I'll do it next time because people are going to stop watching at this point. This is not a good time to do it. So my viewer isn't sending any comments unless it's through, this is StreamYard. It should show me Facebook and YouTube, but I apologize if you're trying to post to me and I can't see it. I'm looking at the comments. I don't see anything. So I'm assuming that maybe just watching passively. So again, thanks for watching. Thanks everybody. At one point I got to 5 people, but thank you everybody for watching, and check out some of my other videos from 10 Minutes for Democracy.